podcast or haven't read my book, Waking Up, basically the issue is this, that consciousness, if you define it as, to follow Thomas Nagel here, the fact that it's like something to be what you are, the fact that a brain of sufficient complexity or a creature at a certain point in evolutionary terms has a subjective, qualitative perspective on the world. The lights go on. This formulation, I mean, there have been many variants of it, but famously, the philosopher Thomas Nagel wrote a paper, a very influential paper in the early 70s, titled, "What is it like to be a bat?" And he said, we may never know. A bat experience could be totally unlike our own. But if it is like something to be a bat, if you switch places with a bat, that wouldn't be synonymous with just the canceling of experience, but you would be laid bare to a different domain of experience. Well, that is the fact of consciousness in the case of a bat. Whether we ever understand it or not, the fact that the lights are on, the fact that there is a perspectival, qualitative character there, that is what we mean by consciousness. And I've always thought that that is a good definition. It doesn't answer any of what Chalmers called the easy problems of consciousness. Those are separate. How does the eye and the visual cortex transduce light energy into a visual mapping of the visual scene? The hard problem on Chalmers' account is always this bit, the fact that it's like something to do any of that, because it's the transition from unconscious seeing, which human brains do and robots do, to the conscious experience of seeing, which we know humans accomplish, and at the moment there's no good reason to think our robots or computers do. And a corollary to this framing is that any explanation we get about consciousness, let's just say we open the back of the book of nature and we get the right answer about consciousness, and it turns out that you need exactly 10,000 information processing units of a certain character. They have to be wired in a certain way. They have to be firing at a certain hertz. And just lo and behold, that is what gives you consciousness. And if you change any of those parameters, well, then the lights go out. Let's say we knew that to be true. It still wouldn't explain the emergence of consciousness in a way that is intuitively graspable. It still would seem like a miracle. And that's not the way most, or really any satisfying scientific explanation works out. When I give you an explanation for any higher level property, the fluidity of water or the brittleness of glass, in terms of its micro constituents, well then that explanation actually does run through and conserves your intuitions about how things function at a lower level so as to appear as they do on a higher level. And so it is, I would argue, even with the example you just gave of life. So you said that 100 years ago, or even less, 70 years ago, perhaps, let me get my dates right, it's more like 80 years ago, people felt that we would never have a satisfactory explanation of what life is, or how life, the energy of life, relates to physical structure, and how heredity could be a mere mechanism, and how the healing of disease or from wounds could be just a matter of chemistry. But of course, with the advent of molecular biology and other insights, we figured all of that out without remainder, and therefore vitalism, or a notion that there has to be any kind of life spirit in matter, that has gone out the window. That's another analogy that doesn't really get at how mysterious consciousness is, because something like reproduction or growth or healing from injury, that really can be explained mechanistically, and our intuitions run through there. So the conceivability issue for me with the hard problem isn't so much a statement about what is true. It's not that I doubt that consciousness can be an emergent property of information processing because it's so difficult to conceive or impossible to conceive how that works. But it is just a statement about the seeming limits of explanation. It sounds to me that whatever you put in the space provided will still sound like the restatement of a miracle, which is really analogous to how, to take an analogy to cosmology, the idea that everything, including the laws of nature, emerged out of nothing, right? Like just things exploded into being. Now, that may in fact be true, but I would argue, or at least it seems to me, that it's inconceivable or uninterpretable, or it's not understandable. It's the statement of a miracle. And so that's really my fondness for the hard problem is a matter of epistemology more than it is ontology.